Hi there, and welcome back to the HQ. Today, we are going to be reacting to how to butcher your entire game studio in under 45 days. Highguard's disastrous and confusing story. By Mujin. Mujin does a lot of these good, well-informed stories, and Highguard has been one that I've been watching very closely since its very confusing debut at the end of the Game Awards last year. This game that just kind of came out of nowhere with no real pomp and circumstance, and just kind of poofed. And now it's gone. Like I said in a previous statement, everybody knows TF2, Overwatch, and Marvel Rivals. Nobody's playing Highguard. And now nobody's really playing Highguard. So let's jump into this and see just what went wrong with Highguard. And if you didn't know, I have a Patreon now where I upload my reactions, uncensored and uncut, to various shows, anime, and more. So for just $3 a month, you can support me and gain access to that footage there. So why don't you help a ratty out?
$1 million. That's how much it costs to have a game trailer be featured to the millions of people watching the yearly Game Awards ceremony.
Jesus Christ, Jeff Keighley, what kind of racket are you running? Though I did hear that Highguard actually didn't pay anything. According to some sources I've seen, they didn't have to pay anything. Jeff just kind of gave it to them.
However, during the final game reveal of 2025's award show, usually the moment everyone is waiting for,
are you about to just say that exactly what I said?
Preparing us to witness a new revolutionary multiplayer game made by an independent, self-published studio. And you know what? He wasn't exaggerating. In fact, the game was so revolutionary that it managed to get bombarded by negative reviews from the moment it launched. Proceeded to lose over 90% of its player base within less than a week after launch, fired 80% of its staff in barely 2 weeks after launch, and shut down the entire studio as well as the game itself in less than 45 days after launch.
I mean, it still outlasted CONCORD, though. It still outlasted CONCORD. Can we really call this CONCORD 2? Yes, we can.
The story of Highguard is one of utter mismanagement, blatant lies about its independent status, and uncontrollable hubris that spanned over half a decade of development.
They're fibbing?
I mean, it was such a disaster that it most likely burned through tens of millions of dollars of funding, with some even theorizing that the total amount could have been over 200 million. So how did these developers that worked on nothing but industry-defining blockbusters over the years fail so miserably? And why did one of the most influential figures in gaming decide to stake his entire reputation all for the sake of peddling Highguard harder than any other game in his career? Well, as you might expect, the story is very messy and has a lot of details. So, without further ado, let's do this.
Let's jump right into this thing.
The disaster of Highguard, we actually have to go all the way back to 1995.
So to understand why Highguard was a flop in a video gaming landscape where the market is already stuffed full of live service slop, we have to instead circle back to 1995. Make it make sense.
When the Electronic Entertainment Expo, otherwise known as E3, would launch. Back then, video games were nowhere near close to how big they are today. And this expo was mostly used to showcase to publishers and, well, business people certain aspects of the video game industry.
Yeah, I mean, it was a business conference. It was a business conference before anything else.
And mainstream. E3 would benefit from this directly, and it would become the biggest video game related event every single year in parallel to its European counterpart, which was Gamescom. It would consistently be held in the summer of every year, more specifically in the month of June. One of the biggest highlights of E3
I miss E3 so bad.
The peak of the console wars when you had PlayStation.
I miss E3 so damn bad, dude. Like Summer Games Fest just does not compare to the absolute week of hype that is E3. like, Jeff Keighley made out like a bandit whenever it came to the death of E3. Like, for real. So it's just, like, extremely disheartening. Yeah, it's just one of those things that just sucks so bad.
And Xbox rent out spaces a few feet away from each other as they were presenting the next generation consoles that would define gaming for the next few years. This is what E3 truly was all about. However, as you might know by now, all good things come to an end, and E3 unfortunately was no exception. For many people,
another
the end
victim
of E3 was due to
of
the
the
COVID-19
Rona
pandemic, but in other ways, one could say that it began prior. From the day this expo was created, the only people who had access to E3 were industry insiders or press. Regular people
Pretty
had
much,
no access,
yeah.
but E3 2019 changed that. This allowed 15,000 regular people, non-industry insiders, to buy tickets that...
Wait, so literally, the very last E3 was the only one where where it was just a ticketed event? Like, are we for real, dog? Like, the very last E3 was the only E3 where it was a ticketed event where you didn't have to be some kind of, like, gaming YouTuber or, like, a game journo to get into this thing. All right, then. You have a good one.
were priced at over $100 so that they could, for the first time, join in on the fun. This showed that E3 was looking for more ways to make money. It simply wasn't sustainable to run this based purely on industry insiders. In 2020, the public passes were going to go from 15,000 to 25,000, showing a real need of more ways to make money. However, due to the pandemic, everything came to a halt. Unlike other conventions or events that brought their content online or remote, E3 decided to pretty much kill everything. 2020 was the only year since 1995 that had nothing to do with the Electronic Entertainment Expo.
I still don't understand how they couldn't have made, like, some kind of online expo of some kind. Like, I don't know, like, coordinating with the big three and the other various publishers. But now we just don't have these events anymore because the only thing we have is Summer Games Fest around that time now. And we don't get, like, the big, like, Bethesda panel, the big Ubisoft panel, the big Nintendo, Xbox, Sony. We don't get those, like, all in the same, like, span of a week anymore, unfortunately. And that just sucks.
Now look, it's no secret. There are certain developers like Nintendo who've been holding their own presentations every single year since 2014. E3 shutting down in 2020 only made it more clear. Nintendo Direct is not only here to stay, it should be the primary source of Nintendo news.
Yeah.
Xbox, who would usually reserve their biggest announcements for E3, would take a page out of Nintendo's playbook, inaugurating the Xbox Games Showcase, which has been, since that year, their main way to showcase their biggest announcements.
Yeah, like, pretty much everybody has gone, like, the Nintendo Direct model. Like, the Nintendo Direct was, like, the first one to do it all the way back in 2014. And now you have, like, the Xbox, like, the Xbox thing, this PlayStation State of Play, and, like, even, like, even, like, other studios, like, Capcom's gotten into it, Sega's gotten into it with, the Sonic Central stuff for, like, all, like, their Sonic-centric news, which hopefully we get one of those soon so we could so we can finally get the next big Sonic title announced. That'd be really lovely.
PlayStation would do the exact same thing with the State of Play. In 2021, E3 was still not held physically, but this time they held it remotely with anyone able to join. They were hoping to return to an in-person event by 2022, but those plans were also completely scrapped, and there wasn't even a digital event. It was just like 2020. They were finally meant to bring back E3 physically in 2023, but due to the lack of interest by publishers who had already spent so much making their own shows, they just decided to flat out cancel it.
Yeah, like, once they got all of their own
shows, you had developers making their own shows too, like EA Play, the Ubisoft conference, the Square Enix conference.
Everybody just doing their own thing.
Redundant, and the pandemic only accelerated that. I truly think
that
this was where the world was headed anyway. Problem is, though, now you had multiple different conferences to look forward to for different publishers and games, and that in turn left a huge vacuum for any mid-sized or indie-sized studio. Where were they meant to talk about their games? Well, that's where Jeff Keighley comes
Good old
in.
Jeffy boy.
Look, Jeff, when it comes to the video game industry, has been a veteran for a very long time.
Oh, yeah.
If you followed any gaming
He's been
news or
around for a
events,
while.
you must have definitely seen his face at least once, whether it be E3, Gamescom, or any high-profile gaming-related event. His story goes back decades, even though the guy for some reason never ages. He was truly able
The dude
to
is
put
a
his name on
lich.
the map when he was
He's
the
a
only
lich.
journalist who was present with Valve as they were launching Half-Life 2. Taking you
Wow.
behind the scenes in a studio,
Wow, Jeff Keighley was the only journalist there for the reveal of Half-Life 2. Wow.
Valve, which is known to be quite secretive to the public. He was also involved in his fair share of controversies like the whole Dorito-gate saga, when he presented the Halo partnership with Mountain Dew and Doritos, which
Oh,
led to this
God.
famous picture. Fundamentally, though, to Jeff, his
They
goal has
put the
always
Master
been
Chief
to
in
give
the
gaming
soda.
what it deserves, and that's to put it on
Master
par
Chief
with
in the
other
soda.
creative avenues, like movies. Both his parents were executives at IMAX. This meant that he constantly attended things like the Oscars. From an early age, he wondered why video games didn't have an equivalent to the Oscars, even though they were a medium that deserved it. In 2014, he would do something
Yeah, and Jeff even like posted recently, like kind of blasting the Oscars because like they had like I believe they had like an in memoriam section during the Oscars this year because I'm pretty sure they do every year. And Jeff's father passed away. And he felt extremely burned because they didn't have a section. I think it was because they didn't have a section in the in memoriam for his father, who made a lot of sweeping innovations whenever it came to IMAX. So, you know, I can very much understand him feeling burned at that.
ridiculous, insane even, which is creating a new award show for video games with money out of his own pocket. He refused to fundraise it because he said it would be too awkward. He wanted to put his money where his mouth was.
Oh, yeah.
The reason why he was insane was because throughout the years, there were many other attempts to do this. These gaming awards, none of them would really stick. But over the years, he did exactly that. It actually stuck and has now become an integral part of video games. However, as E3
holding it at the end of the year, the Game Awards, like,
filling the
it's
void
simple
that it
to the
left.
point.
This is when he would launch the Summer Game Fest. It took place in the same month that E3 took place in. It wasn't rocket science. It aimed
Early
to fill
June.
the exact void left over by E3's cancellation. This meant that Jeff and his production team would not only head the prestigious Game Awards in December, but would also have another event called the Summer Game Fest in the summer. Both of these events would have game reveals,
tackling
and both of
it
them would be
every
watched
6
by
months,
hundreds of
basically
thousands of
just,
people expecting
like,
to see
cornering
games
the
that would
market.
revolutionize the space. When it came to the Game Awards in particular, over the years, it had gotten so successful with such a high, consistent viewership that by 2025, it was reported that if you want to showcase a 3-minute trailer during the awards, it would cost you over $1 million.
God, that's a
Almost
hell of a
doubling
racket.
the prices from 2024.
Jesus.
And of course, it goes without saying, the most valuable slot in the entire award show is the final game that's shown.
Of course.
In show
This
business,
is a very
you
long
always save the
preamble.
best for last. You want people to keep watching. And so, this is why it was so
Here we
shocking
go.
to the world that for the Game Awards 2025, with such high prices, the game deemed most valuable in the entire show, the one shown at the end, would be something they had never heard of before. Highguard. And this is how it would be presented. Take a look for yourself.
That is...
You know, sometimes our last reveal at the Game Awards is a teaser for something years and years away. Not tonight.
Yeah, this was a
Our final
mistake.
world premiere comes from 61 members of the team that built Apex Legends and Titanfall. 4 years ago, the principals founded a new independent studio with the hopes of pushing the shooter genre forward with a new original game. They've done it in complete secrecy, which is even more amazing because the game is very deep into development. The power of independent, self-published studios to push this medium forward is a growing and I think positive theme in our industry. And so tonight, you're not only going to get the announcement of the game, but also your first look at the gameplay. I've played it, and after you see this trailer, I think you're going to want to as well. Welcome to Highguard.
Oh my god.
1,200 likes on the video. 17,000
Oh my
dislikes. I'm not
god.
gonna show you the gameplay just yet. You need
That
even more
that was
context
a
to understand
whiplash.
just how ridiculous everything he said truly was. Prior to this Game Awards
Absolute
show, Jeff would
cope.
tweet coordinates, on Twitter, just randomly, that would lead you to this weird statue in the middle of the Mojave
Yeah,
Desert.
the divinity
It was an enigma.
statue there.
For weeks, people had no idea what it was. This was the main mystery of the Game Awards, and that game ended up being none other than Divinity, made by Larian Studios, the same people who made Baldur's Gate 3. To many, this was the biggest game of the Game Awards. This was meant
Divinity
to be
was the big
final
one.
game to be shown, right? The biggest event of that day. Instead, what people got was a game they never heard of before, that looked fairly generic, that didn't really seem to make it clear
Generic
what it was about.
hero
Jeff
shooter.
had hyped this up like a revolutionary title, but it looked like any other game you could find on Steam right now.
Pretty crazy, that's right. Highguard launches in just 7 weeks on PC, PlayStation, and Xbox. It is
Pretty
insanely
crazy.
Fun to play, as you saw in that trailer. And now it's time for our final award. Last year, Astrobot.
So there it was, the biggest game of this prestigious award show, coming out in 7 weeks and seemingly out of nowhere. So as you would expect,
it was kind of out of
people put on
nowhere,
their
huh?
investigative fedoras to determine where this independent, self-publishing developer, as Jeff described it, came from. And that investigation would only lead to more confusion and suspicion. You see, the studio behind Highguard, Wildlight Entertainment, made their first announcement to the public that they exist back in the beginning of 2023. Here we can see the design and creative director of Wildlight making a tweet saying, "What have I been up to over the last year anyway?
2023.
Working hard on a game with amazing people who I trust very much. Today we announced Wildlight Entertainment, our new studio. I've never been happier, prouder, and hyped for the game."
So they were already working on in 2023.
Legends, Titanfall 1 and 2, Modern Warfare 2, and Call of Duty World at War, to name a few. So these are very well-regarded games.
So he worked on some of the only Call of Duty games I've actually played.
World. We're very excited today to announce our new game studio, Wildlight Entertainment. We've got big dreams of creating an epic shooter IP. And here we can see a Zoom call of 22 different staff members that were working at that studio.
So see, the first problem is immediately going into like the shooter genre whenever there is a massive oversaturation in the market for shooters. That right there was problem numero uno. You should have started something a little small, started a little easier, and then kind of built your own IP up there. Get something that is something that's a lot harder to fail instead of jumping straight into a project that is undoubtedly going to fail. Also, hi Alcor. Welcome. Thank you. This ratty is having a very good morning.
As early as 2023. It wouldn't even take a day for game publications to start reporting on this. Former Apex Legends, Titanfall developers create new studio, Wildlight Entertainment.
Why is this unlocking some core memories?
Chad, someone who was at Respawn Entertainment for around 11 years.
I remember seeing this on Twitter.
For Apex Legends, a game that had, made a lot of money.
Oh,
so no wonder many publications
no wonder EA is trying to sabotage it at every turn.
Developers that made their studios a lot of money, now forming their own. And so far, other than this very limited array of information we have from 2023, the only other thing we knew was from Jeff Keighley himself, calling it a self-published independent studio. Even though their own company LinkedIn page,
something about that seems sus,
would say Wildlight Entertainment is a new, fully funded entertainment studio, never really specifying where they got their money from. In fact, what I find interesting is that the website linked on their LinkedIn is wildlightentertainment.com. And when you go there, it says, "We're under construction. Please check back for an update soon." It's not even wildlight.gg, which actually works. But this little piece of
that is weird.
Aside, Wildlight was about to face a world of hurt that they could have never predicted after their reveal at the Game Awards.
Oh?
You see, back in 2024, Sony launched
CONCORD
shooter that was meant to be live service that cost over $400 million, and that was such a disastrous flop. It shut down in under 2 weeks. I mean, it resulted in a
$400
studio that Sony had
million
bought to shut down
dollars.
immediately afterwards. This made many people ask the question, who asked for this game to begin with?
Literally
Ever since then,
who?
whenever someone comes out with a newly announced live service multiplayer game, they're placed under 1,000 times more scrutiny due to this. And while I'm sure the
Thank you,
Highguard
Alcor.
developers, after
I'm
working in
very
secrecy for
proud
so
of my
long, were
bouncy
so excited
physics.
about the Game Awards reveal, what they could have probably never expected is that people were making direct comparisons of their game to CONCORD, the worst thing you can ever hope to happen in this day and age.
Oh,
Based
yeah.
on this uninspired generic gameplay they showed during the Game Awards, even with Jeff's insane hype towards it, it seemed like it was going to be nothing more than a CONCORD 2.0.
Now, see, personally, I think what would have helped Highguard, like, do not do like the super realistic art style. Go for something a bit more stylized. Like, I think, like, obviously, this is right here, and this isn't me just, like, saying this as, like, an anime girl. This is me saying this as someone who watched, like, CONCORD flop as hard as it did, and being able to point out all the problems with it. You want to have a stylized art style, maybe some more exaggerated melee combat, and with like a I don't know, like I can't like put it into words, but like something a bit more stylized, something like more exaggerated, something that doesn't look like it is just another generic shooter game. But they did the exact opposite of that. They did generic shooter, and now the game died in a month.
Developer's worst nightmare. But you know what didn't help at all? Highguard's social media page would tweet almost immediately after the trailer would come out during the Game Awards, saying, "What a night! We'd like to extend a big thank you to Jeff Keighley and the Game Awards. We have so much in store for you when the game launches on January 26th, and can't wait to welcome everyone into the world of Highguard. We'll see you next year, Wardens." Okay, this is a post you would expect them to make.
Well, Alcor, really what I'm thinking as far as like more stylized art style for is less of a just like, you know, less of just like cell shading and more of like more exaggerated character designs, something that gives each character their own personality. Because it's like, think of like Marvel Rivals and how each character has a very distinct design. How like just looking like characters, like the difference between Hulk and Banner. Banner is super scrawny. He looks like a string bean. He looks like a stick figure. And then suddenly Hulk is massive, booming. Or like more of a, or if you want like a more low-key example, something a little different from the more anime aesthetic of Marvel Rivals. God, what the fuck is that one? I cannot remember it off the top of my head. What's that one, that cel-shaded, rhythm-based beat-em-up game with the cat on, that everybody on, with the robot cat that everybody wants to fuck, that Microsoft put out and then immediately killed the studio? What is that game? I'm trying to think of it. Like something like with like an art style like that, or like just cel-shaded, stylized, over the top, instead of just generic shooty bangs. Like that's like kind of where I'm leaning. Like that's just my 2 cents. I'm not a game designer. I'm not like a game analytical person. That's just me from like the average consumer.
After the big reveal, sure. You know what else you would expect though? Them continuing to tweet up until release day.
They didn't
Except
tweet?
They didn't. They literally disappeared. To the point where many gaming publications, including Forbes, would start making articles about how they went MIA right after the Game Awards. No new videos on their YouTube page, no new tweets on their Twitter account.
So
nothing.
they just went radio
silence, and the game was meant to come out 3 weeks from then. This article
So they
was
just
written
went
on
dead
January
silent.
6th. The game was going to come out in 20 days. 6 days later, Paul Tassi from Forbes would write another article on January 12th titled "The Highguard Mystery." 2 weeks to launch in complete silence.
God
Now, look,
damn.
to be fair,
Complete
this
silence
could have been
2
a
weeks
genius
out.
marketing move. Everyone was talking about this game, saying how they probably closed down or declared bankruptcy right before launch. However, in my opinion,
That
it'd
would be
naive to
funny.
think that there's no such
Would
thing
be
as
quite
bad
funny.
publicity all the time. No, there are exceptions. This isn't the Wolf of Wall Street. When your game is being called by so many people CONCORD 2, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy unless you're there to stop it. Highguard
Yeah,
wasn't there to
pretty
stop
much.
it. In fact, a new theory is popping up now, the fact that they weren't even going to release anymore. And just as you thought that things couldn't get worse, so
Like, imagine
shortly
if they just
before the game
didn't
was
release the
meant to
game.
launch, things got
That
even
would be
weirder.
funny.
The
Like,
senior
that
writer
would
of
be
Game
funny.
and Tech Adventure Beat, Imran Khan, would come out with the news. Highguard did not pay a single penny to be featured in the
there
most
it is.
valuable spot in the Game Awards spotlight.
They
That's
didn't pay a
The
thing.
same Game Awards that
At
charges
all.
$1 million for 3 minutes gave its most valuable spot during the entire show for free. On January 17th, 2026,
They must have given Jeff like some of the sloppiest toppy backstage to get that slot, because there is no way in hell Jeff actually thought that Highguard was going to be like the next big thing, especially not when Marvel Rivals was at its peak and Overwatch making a comeback. Like, no way in hell he thought it would actually like work out for them.
9 days before the game was meant to come out, Forbes would also confirm this, citing 2 separate sources that reached out, confirming, yes, they didn't pay a single penny. Jeff
Like,
just really liked the
goddamn.
game and offered it to them. So
God
there we
damn,
were,
they must have
9
that,
days
like,
away
their
from
Gluck Gluck
release,
game,
and this
like,
bombshell
their Gluck
dropped.
Gluck game
Is this
must be
Concord 2.0?
phenomenal.
Did they go bankrupt before the game even releases? And why the hell did Jeff give his most popular spot in the show to this very generic looking game? The gaming community was
Woo.
truly baffled at something that had never really occurred before.
Yeah,
And
it
just as
is
the
an
Discourse was
enigma. I
running
wanna know why.
rampant
I wanna
on
know
every
why.
piece of social media you can imagine, something completely unexpected ended up happening. And
Oh.
that's Highguard finally breaking their silence
Oh.
barely 3 days before release. On January 22nd, 2026, Jeff Keighley would tweet, "Just 4 days until the launch of Highguard on Monday on Steam and consoles." Bear in mind, up until this point, Highguard had said nothing since the Game Awards reveal. Jeff was single-handedly carrying this game's entire marketing. And
Jeff
many of
is
the
just
comments
carrying
are pretty
it.
much saying
Have
it.
you heard
Paul Tassi, the same
anything?
guy who wrote those Forbes articles, would literally say, "Have you heard anything? Like, is the developer still here? Did they not go bankrupt?" And it would only be
You
on
heard
January
anything?
23rd,
Anything?
2026 that Highguard would finally make some sort of social media announcement 3 days before their release.
So-
saying, "Tune in on Monday, January 26th at 10 a.m. PT
So
for the
they
Highguard launch
posted-
showcase. Here, we'll show
So they posted like a big thank you message to Jeff on the day of their game's reveal, and then they didn't post a single thing marketing their game, hyping it up, nothing at all. And then they suddenly post 3 days before the game comes out, talking about a launch party. You can see why this game failed.
share an in-depth look at Highguard direct from the studio, featuring a full gameplay deep dive, year 1 plans, and much more." As you can imagine, many of the comments
Bro
were
finally
roasting
remembered the
and grilling them,
password.
with some acknowledging that this might have just been a very good marketing strategy. The Highguard account would then begin a countdown, posting every day up until release, saying 1 day remains.
He
You know
low-key
what?
cooking?
Looking at some of these
Well, he's
420
he-
replies,
like, he's
there was
definitely
some excitement
cooking
brewing. You know,
something.
people were very curious.
Shame
to
he
see
don't know how to
why
cook.
was Jeff talking about this game so much? And God, talking about it was an understatement. The guy couldn't stop talking, as if they held his family hostage. On January 23rd, he would just tweet this image randomly saying, "Highguard, January 26th at 10 a.m. PST, signaling when it would release." Someone in the replies would say, "Thanks, Jeff," to which Jeff would say, "See you
Wario
online.
64.
It's a special one." The next day, he'd post a badge.
Oh,
saying,
God.
"I first went hands-on last summer and had so much fun with Highguard. Now it's your turn on Monday. Curious what everyone thinks." On that same day, he would post a GIF saying, "In 48 hours, I'll be accepting your apologies, so when Highguard comes out." On January 26th, when the game would come out, he'd post a screen cap of a Polygon article. The title was, Highguard isn't dead on arrival. In fact, after 4 hours, I'm
Oh my
convinced it's one of the
god,
best
Jeff is
shooters
coping
in
so
years.
hard.
This didn't really mean much though, because Polygon thought Dragon Age the Veilguard was actually good, along with Concord. 1 minute later, after that
God,
Polygon...
I don't even want to think about BioWare right now, because it just makes me sad, because for starters, they're owned by EA, who's going to be owned by fucking Saudi Arabia. And also, the fact that as someone who is a card-carrying Mass Effect diehard superfan, I am not looking forward to the potential of BioWare being shut down by the Saudi investment fund when they buy EA. I really hope not, because the Saudi prince in particular, who's touting about buying EA, seems like a gamer, so maybe he won't shut it down. But then again, this is also the Saudis we're talking about. So who knows?
Post, he would make another post with 4 different images of the game saying screenshots from Highguard, now live and free. Look, I think you get the point I'm trying to make here. This guy was tweeting and talking about this game more than their official account. And when I say this
damn,
guy,
Jeff, why don't you get a job as the game's marketing manager?
Video gaming. For some reason, he decided to stake his entire reputation on this game being a success, being fun, being good. So much so that he gave it his most valuable spot in his show. At this point, there was 3 possibilities. He had a financial stake in this game, his family was being held hostage by Highguard devs, or he just genuinely wanted to help. Regardless of those possibilities, though, he just staked his entire
I'm guessing it's just he wanted to help.
That meant something.
Yeah.
Some of the biggest
and
content creators would check out this game as soon as it was released.
Yes,
good that some would be sponsored. That was Highguard's social media strategy, similarly to Apex Legends. We'll get more into that later. But let's not pretend that they wouldn't have played it anyway, because God, the curiosity would kill you. Why is this guy who's so influential
Shroud and Ninja
everything for it? It must be good, right? Well, actually, it was dude, it was fucking mid. The trailer turned out to actually do it a lot of justice. It was generic as hell. Jeff's efforts would make it so that the game had 100,000 concurrent players.
100K.
That's a crazy number. However,
on day one.
Even Jeff's endless marketing wouldn't prove good enough if your game just doesn't cut it, and it didn't.
Oh. So it lost 90% of its player base in like 2 days. Bruh.
The player count would fall off very quickly. Almost a day after the game would come out, Jeff would tweet, "Thoughts on Highguard so far." This tweet has over 7.5 million views, 5,900 replies. It was safe to say that he didn't really get the response he was looking for. I'm sure he was hoping for, "Jeff, you're right. Sorry, you proved me wrong." But instead, he got the absolute opposite. And of course, one of the biggest questions being asked at the time was, why did he shill this game so damn hard?
He has to have some kind of incentive.
Someone would at Jeff saying, "Hey Jeff, I was wondering if you financially backed Highguard during development or owned some percentage of the company." Obviously, you don't have to answer, just curious if you have any incentive with Wildlight Entertainment if they hit certain earning thresholds. To which he would reply with, "Lol. Absolutely.
Thank you for the follow, 6-7.
This meant that the 3 possibilities I listed earlier.
I would do the 6-7, but I can't do that. My arms, I cannot move.
Or he genuinely was just trying to help. Well, as I mentioned, even his help wouldn't be enough if the game wasn't up to par. On Steam, the game would open up with overwhelmingly negative reviews, with only 17% of them.
I do have a rather
positive.
big tail.
The main complaints were poor performance, uninspired art direction, and just tedious gameplay. Look, if I had to explain to you the purpose of a game, like let's say Call of Duty or Apex Legends,
okay, what is
take 10 seconds? Like for example, in Apex Legends, you have multiple operators,
what's the gameplay loop?
Abilities. You land on a big map, and your goal is to loot gear to survive, hunting down other players and being the last team to live.
I mean, even that's kind of a wordy explanation. Basically, just say it's like Fortnite Battlefield. It's just like a BR with operators instead of like random dropping in. Like, just say that.
Done. Yeah, well, just to explain the gameplay loop of Highguard, GameSpot made a YouTube short. This was them trying to explain it as fast and simply as possible. You want to know how long the short is? 1 minute, 48 seconds. They needed almost 2 minutes to explain to you the gameplay loop of Highguard.
Wow.
That already says a lot to the complexity and tediousness of this
Are we about
game.
to watch it?
Look, overall, it doesn't
Okay,
take a genius
thank
to
God.
understand from their trailer. You had multiple wardens, characters you could play with different abilities. You and your team would also vote
Okay, so
on
you're
a base.
heroes.
There was multiple types of bases that you could start with. The whole point of this game was to fortify your base and attack the other base. You had to find a sword on a map which would allow you to destroy the shield of the enemy base, and then you'd be the attacker, they'd be the defender. And in order to win, you'd have to destroy multiple things in that base of theirs, their generators, their power, etc., etc.
So this is already like 3 different game modes. Like, it's survival, capture the flag, and then you...
That's it really in an utter nutshell. Now look, in theory,
It's
this might
CTF,
sound fun, but there were
capture
some things
point,
that just didn't really
survival.
make much sense that really added to the tediousness. This map was absolutely massive, and yet it was only 3v3. That to many people didn't make much sense.
3v3.
These aspects of tediousness, as well as uninspired gun gameplay,
Bruh.
coupled with the fact that everything looked generic, a McDonald's type of art direction, as you might say, like as if you bought a bunch of different assets from a marketplace, gave the impression to many people that this was some sort of a Frankenstein game. Like they just took a bunch of different things they developed over a couple of years and just shipped it together just to get something out for people to play.
It
And even though
seems
the game
like
was
it.
free, the game was bleeding players like it had been struck in an artery. As of now, even game journalists found this game to be lacking, uninspiring, giving it a 63 out of 100 Metacritic score, but the real pain
Jeez.
came from the players.
Ooh.
2.6 out of 10 from almost 300 user ratings.
God damn,
Steam currently
dude.
has over 30,000 reviews, and it's sitting on mixed, with only 46% of them having something positive to say. The day
Wow.
after release, Jeff would acknowledge that things weren't going that well for him. He'd jokingly say, opening X this morning, while linking an image of Flynn Rider from Tangled surrounded by many different swords. This tweet would again gain a lot of exposure.
God.
5 million views, 47,000 likes, 2,000 replies.
What them
And
replies
again, as you
look
might
like.
imagine, a lot of them were not positive.
Oh
Many people
my
in the industry would take notice of this, and some would choose to speak out.
When did it become trendy to hand a new game? Seeing it become more and more in recent years is exhausting. Oh God! So they're really coping hard.
Against it. You'd have the vice president and co-founder of Epic Games say it's downright horrible, referring to all the hate this new game was getting. Especially a free game from a new studio. Just so sad. This is a hobby for people they should approach with joy, not hatred. Of course, many of these 200 replies.
Oh yeah, let's approach all gamings with joy and not hatred. Yes, I could approach let's see. Atari ET for the Atari. Let's approach that with joy and not hatred, shall we? Despite the fact that that game almost single-handedly caused the video game crash of the 1980s. And the fact that there's literally a New Mexico landfill full of unsold copies of that game. But yes, joy, not hatred. Namaste. Namaste.
Would not have positive things to say. One of the tweets on this topic that will get the most attention would be from Sven Vinke, the studio head of Larian, the creators behind Baldur's Gate 3, saying, "I don't like people shitting on things others have created. Putting something out into the world makes you vulnerable, and that alone deserves respect, even if you dislike the creation. It's easy to destroy things, it's a lot harder to build them. The best critics understand this. Even when they're being critical, they do their best not to be hurtful." Again, as you might expect, the top replies, the most liked ones at least, were not in agreement with him. In just one day,
Yeah.
Highguard would lose
Don't
half
piss
its
on my
player
leg
count.
and tell me
Another
it's
day would
raining,
pass by,
dog.
they would lose yet another 50% of their player count. It seemed like with every passing day, thousands of players were leaving. But hey, it seemed like they weren't going to let that get in the way of their plans.
Oh,
Shortly
I'm
after the game would
sure.
come out, they would tweet, "Here's a look at the Highguard Year 1 game plan. Episode
Wow.
2 arrives in 2
Confident.
weeks. Each episode is 2 months long. Content shown is free for all players." And they would have plans up until December 2026. Every 2 months, you'd
Wow.
have a new warden, a new character to play. Every 4 months, you'd have a new map. Ranked mode was coming soon. You'd have new weapons, new raid tools, new limited time game modes. I mean, it seemed like they had things figured out. It seemed like they were here for the long run.
So they only made it to episode 2 then.
It also seemed like they were very open for feedback and weren't afraid to try new things. On January 30th, the #1 marketer of this game, Jeff Keighley, would tweet out,
the #1 marketing man.
5v5 raid mode to the game, playable today.
Dead game, lol.
Help with player retention. Yes, a few thousands would play.
Yeah,
realize
you know,
that the
they
game
came
just
back
wasn't for them, like definitively, and then it would proceed to lose many more players, reaching below 10,000
it
on the
dipped
3rd
under
of February,
5 figures.
and only dwindling more since then. By February 12th, the game would be down to
my god.
3,100
They went from about
players on
100,000
Steam, and with every
to
passing day,
3K.
they kept losing hundreds more.
In like 2
Even with
weeks.
their 1-year planning strategy and their willingness to accept feedback, it seemed like the CONCORD 2 prophecy was coming true no matter how hard they tried to
It always
fight
comes
it.
back.
This would be directly confirmed to us because in barely just 2 weeks after the launch of the game, the majority, not just a small chunk, the majority of the employees working at Wildlight Entertainment would get laid off. On February 12th, 2026, when the game was down to a mere 3,000 players on Steam and no doubt a few thousand on consoles as well, the Twitter account Shinobi602 would tweet out, Highguard developer Wildlight Entertainment has seemingly laid off most of its staff, quoting a LinkedIn post from an employee in which they said, unfortunately, along with most of the team at Wildlight, I was laid off today. The LinkedIn post would go deeper, saying, this one really stings as there was a lot of unreleased content I was really looking forward to that I and others designed for Highguard. This person in particular was a senior level designer with 7 years of experience in the AAA game space. He's now been 3 weeks, and as far as I could tell from his profile, he's still looking for a job. Around the same time, another employee would make a Twitter article titled, Reflecting on Shipping My First Game, Highguard. This post would prove to be a disaster. The developer in question would get brigaded and bombarded with some very harsh words, turning a very bad situation even uglier.
That's not cool. It's like now if the developer was like, first of all, it's never cool to like brigade somebody and just be like shitty and negative to them. Like if you have like some kind of constructive criticism, go for it. But like, don't brigade and be a dickhead. Like that's just like common sense, right? But like, naturally, if like they're like coping hard about the game and you have some constructive criticism, I mean, you know, Mr. Muskie Boy wanted X, the everything app. I'm still calling it Twitter. He wanted Twitter to be like this open forum for all people to chat and talk and converse and exchange words in the marketplace of ideas. So like naturally, like you should be open to discussion and like critical discussion, but like don't be a dickhead. That's like simple, very simple words to live by. Don't be a dickhead.
Couple of paragraphs that I'll read out to you and, well, you can make up your own mind. He'd say that the game had unbiased internal pre-reveal feedback and it was quite positive. When it was negative, it was constructive and often actionable, indicating that there was, as far as they were concerned, nothing wrong with the game. He'd then continue, but then the trailer came out, and it was all downhill from there. Content creators love to point out the bias in folks who give positive reviews after being flown out for an event, but ignore the fact that when their negative-leaning content gets 10 times the engagement of the positive, they've got just as much incentive to lean into a disingenuous direction, whether consciously or not.
Okay, so, like, this right here just kind of reads... I'm not going to say it reads as cope, but, like, if people have negative things to say about your game, even if they're not, like, if there's, like, have negative things to say about their game, like, you should accept that.
The hate started immediately. In addition to dogpiling on the trailer, I personally came under fire due to my naivete on Twitter, which almost all of my now former coworkers had learned to avoid during their previous game launches.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
After setting my Twitter account to private to protect my sanity, many content creators made videos and posts about me and my cowardice, amassing millions of views and inadvertently sending hundreds of angry gamers into my replies. They laughed at me for being proud of the game, told me to get out the McDonald's applications, and mocked me for listing having autism in my bio, which they seemed to think was evidence the game would be woke trash. All of this was very emotionally taxing. He would then acknowledge
Yeah,
that
that's
there's
just the
much
internet for
constructive
you.
criticism about the
People
trailer,
just don't have
marketing,
nice
and
shit to say
launch,
sometimes.
but also isn't sure if things would have been better
It's
had
very
the game not been
unfortunate.
announced at the Game Awards. He would then say, "We were turned into a joke from minute one, largely due to the false assumptions about $1 million ad placement, which even prominent journalists soon began to state as fact. Within minutes, it was decided. This game was dead on arrival. And creators had free rage bait content for a month. Every one of our videos on social media got downvoted to hell. Comment sections were flooded with copy-paste meme phrases such as CONCORD 2 and Titanfall 3 died for this. At launch, we received over 14,000 review bombs from users with less than an hour of playtime. Many didn't even finish the required tutorial." He'd finished this.
Okay, so if you have an hour of playtime and haven't finished the tutorial, what kind of tutorial do you have?
By saying, "If this pattern continues, all that will be left are corporations, at least in the multiplayer space. Innovation is on life support. Even if Highguard had a rocky launch, our independent, self-published, dev-led studio full of passionate people just trying to make a fun game with zero AI and zero corporate oversight deserved better than this.
That's a lot
We
of
deserve
weird,
the bare minimum of
some
not
weird
having our
emphasis
downfall
put
be
there.
gleefully manifested." Barely a couple of days after this article would come out on Twitter, this developer would end up deleting his account. For many of his
Understandable.
loudest haters, this article
Understandable.
he wrote was nothing more than him playing the victim, blaming gamers, blaming content creators, blaming pretty much anyone except maybe himself and the game developers that made this game that seemingly no one asked for. On the other hand, though, one can understand his frustration. He had worked for almost 3 years on the game, finally revealed it, and within the span of a month, his whole life fell apart.
Yeah, like, that is definitely understandable, too. It's like, I can understand the frustration. He's been working on this game since 2023, and it finally gets revealed at, like, the biggest possible stage, and it's getting reamed. Like, I understand the frustration, but at the same time, you have to be careful not to lean into the range of cope.
I don't know what he was hoping to do with this article, but, you know, in the end, as we can see, his account was gone. But that was the least of his worries and the least of many other people's worries when it came to Highguard. That's because barely a day after the mass layoffs would happen, Highguard's website, when you'd go to it, would say, "Site unavailable. This site is currently unavailable. Please contact some email for assistance." Under that, you would see a link to their Discord server and their Twitter profile. Now, the Twitter link worked. The Discord link, on the other hand, did not. In fact, when you would click on it, it would redirect you to a completely different and unrelated Discord server by the name of Highguard Gaming Guild. This had nothing to do with the game. It was
somebody
just called
swiped
Highguard.
the
They didn't even bother
URL.
posting the right server in that link. Additionally, as
I mean, it's more likely that they realized the link was dead. They realized that the link was dead, and somebody just swiped the URL.
this was all happening, Highguard couldn't even be found as a YouTube category anymore. Usually when you upload a video of a game, you can very easily
oh my
label
god.
it. Let's say League of Legends or
Jesus.
Call of Duty. Highguard had a category, but it was removed. And during all this, someone would ask in the correct Highguard Discord server, "What's up with the website being updated?" And someone from the Highguard team would say, "Not sure on the time frame, but basically it needs to be transferred and simplified. Low priority at the moment, reputational damage already done. Now we just need to focus on delivering updates and content to improve." Now look, I already know what you're thinking. Mujin, this is a catastrophe. This is a disaster. What the hell is happening?
Very much.
Oh yeah, it is. You're completely right about that. But here's the thing. It's about to get a million times worse.
How is it going to get worse?
Jeff had introduced Highguard's developer. Here are his exact words. This is how he described them.
The power of independent, self-published studios to push the
Independent, self-published studios. Earlier than this, during this clip, he would also call them independent, indie. Hell, even the employee who had written that article before deleting his account would refer to them the same exact way. Independent, self-published studio.
Are they not indie?
The impression
I mean,
studio was
it seems like it, but like
self-funded. This is what everyone was saying. However, on February 17th, 2026, the same day their website would go down, the games journalist Stefan Totillo would drop a bombshell saying, sources, Tencent secretly funded struggling shooter Highguard. Wildlight Entertainment has said for years it was fully funded, but not shared detail. Stephen's article would go into specifics, saying that it wasn't Tencent, the Chinese entity that directly funded them. It was done through a subsidiary. Timmy,
Okay.
saying sources familiar with the Tencent Wildlight connection said that Tencent studio group Timmy was the group backing Wildlight. They did not specify to GameFile the reason for the secrecy about the agreement, nor did they share the scale. It's unclear if or when the funding ended and how that relates to last week's layoffs. Wildlight has been technically independent and not part of Timmy.
Technically
Tencent are
independent.
massive players in gaming, and yes, they are. I've mentioned them on this channel already. One can't forget that Tencent Games owns Honor of Kings,
Yeah.
the highest grossing mobile game of all time ever in the history of humanity, sitting at
Honor of
$18.6
Kings /
billion,
Arena of Valor.
making even more money than Candy Crush Saga. Let's also not forget that they own 40% of Epic Games as well as 100% of Riot Games, the creators of League of Legends. This, of course, dealt an even bigger blow to Highguard's already dwindling reputation that was down in the gutter. People felt like they were lying about their whole independent self-published
good old
status.
Larry
And while we don't have
Bundy
a specific
Jr.
number as to how much Tencent could have funded the studio with, some people have been floating around the idea that it was over $200 million. And
Fun fact about Larry Bundy. Did you know? Now, this is going to be reaching in some territory that's a little not safe for work, which is a weird thing to preface about Guru Larry. Which, you know, he is he's a voice actor for hire, of course, naturally. But he voices a bit character in a not safe for work video game that I was a beta tester on, called Future Fragments. Basically, it's like throughout the levels you can find like audio logs and data logs and shit like that, and they like expand the lore of the universe. And one of those characters in the data logs was voiced by Larry Bundy Jr. But yeah, if you happen to like games that are like side-scrolling, I guess sorta Metroidvanias. It's level-based, but the levels are like mini Metroidvanias with a mix of Mega Man X and Metal Slug. And also, if you're over the age of 18, obviously, it is available on Steam if you want to check it out. You know, have to be 18, of course. Don't be doing some weird shit. But yeah.
saying that the studio was technically founded in 2021, announced in 2023, and had its first game launch in 2026, those many years of development could very easily span tens of millions of dollars. But look, Highguard was already in the shitter, okay? They had laid off most of their staff. I mean, come on, this was going to be dead. This was truly going to be CONCORD 2.
Oh.
The person suffering from this Tencent connection was Jeff Keighley. Now, there was a conspiracy. Wow. Maybe Jeff wasn't doing this because his family was held hostage or out of the goodness of his heart. There was again a third possibility in the mix. He was doing this for real financial incentive because Tencent and Jeff Keighley maintain a long-standing strategic partnership focused on expanding the global reach of the Game Awards and other gaming events.
So the conspiracy now is that Jeff Keighley and Tencent are in bed together.
Since 2016, this collaboration has facilitated the show's distribution in China. And one can see that the senior vice president of Tencent, Xiaoyi Ma, is sitting on the advisory board of the Game Awards. So by February 19th, Jeff's posts on Twitter, in which he would talk about things unrelated to Highguard, would have questions about this. Are you secretly funded by Tencent? Were you pressured by Tencent to make these posts about Highguard? What's going on exactly? This studio is about to completely close its doors.
Okay, so I'm starting to fall into the conspiracy now. Because now, like, there's all of these connections between Jeff Keighley and Tencent coming up now. So was the Game Awards used by Tencent to get the game off the ground?
Game was very mid. You must have been lying that you had fun, right? But still, layoffs aside, Tencent aside, flop and impending doom aside, Highguard would continue to patch and update the game, releasing multiple updates, one on February 19th, as well as one on February 26th, releasing new game modes,
at least they were still patching it, at least.
Was admirable. By February
for
26th,
all 600 players.
To 611 players on Steam. In exactly 1 month since release, the game had gone from 100,000 players to 611 players. The majority had
God
left,
damn.
and no one
That is
was coming
nutty.
back. At this point, the writing was on the wall. It was clear as day. This studio, this game, they weren't going to last. And so
That
on March
is
3rd,
dunzo.
2026, the official Highguard account would post an article saying, Highguard's final update arriving soon. Thank you for playing with us.
The game is dead as of like 5 days ago at time of recording.
We have made the decision to permanently shut down Highguard on March 12th. Since launch, more than 2 million players stepped into Highguard's world. You shared feedback, created content, and many believed in what we were building. For that, we are deeply grateful. They would then go on to say, the team is excited to release one final game update to enjoy in the remaining life of the game. We'll be adding a new warden, a new weapon,
for a
level progression, and skill trees.
For like, what is it, like a week and a half?
Tonight or tomorrow morning for patch release. From all of us at Wildlight, thank you for playing, for supporting us, and for being part of Highguard's story. This article would have over 8 million views.
I know it's out.
100.
I'll be jumping on it
some
here.
Were disappointed or shocked that this had happened. Many were expecting it. Maybe even.
I'll be jumping on that soon.
From the get-go, this game was nothing more than a self-fulfilling prophecy of.
Hey there, Durasteel Bacon. Welcome to the HQ.
In under 2 months, but how did this even happen? How do you get the backing of Jeff Keighley? How do you get the most prestigious slot in the Game Awards show with over 1 million viewers? How do you get financial backing from one of, if not the biggest gaming company in the world? How do you get very talented developers that worked on nothing but...
Thank you for the prime sub, Durasteel Bacon. Thank you so much. As for why Highguard flopped the way it did, probably because it's a PvP raid shooter entering an extremely oversaturated market, having to compete with market share with things like Apex Legends, Overwatch, and Marvel Rivals. I think that speaks for itself. And the fact that it was a complete unknown. It was first revealed to us literally a month before the game released. Like a month and a half before the game released. So, like, yeah, you can kind of see why the game flopped.
But blockbuster games and still managed to fail so miserably. Well, now we know. And it's even messier than we could have ever imagined.
Oh?
Respawn Entertainment is a studio owned by EA.
Okay.
Their first breakout hit was Titanfall, releasing in 2014 and garnering many positive reviews. I personally loved playing it when it came out. It was
I never played
really cool
Titanfall.
Some years would pass by, and they would then release Titanfall 2. This game was not only well received for its multiplayer aspect, but it had something the first game didn't, a single-player campaign. And that was absolutely loved by so many. And even though people were...
Real talk, there are way too many shooters dropping these days that don't have a single-player campaign. Like, literally, if your, like, high-budget first-person shooter does not have some kind of campaign in it, I'm not going to play it. Like, there's a reason why the only first-person shooters I have played in years is, like, just Halo. Like, the only FPSs I played as a kid when I had a PlayStation were the Resistance games. Resistance Fall of Man, Resistance 2, Resistance 3. I even had the PSP Resistance game. Technically, that one was a third-person shooter, I think, but still. Like, and also Metroid Prime 4, if you count that as an FPS, technically. It's like more of a first-person exploration game with shooting mechanics, but still, semantics. But yeah, like, if you're a high-budget first-person shooter with lots of character and personality, doesn't have some kind of story mode, then count me out.
Expecting them to maybe work on Titanfall 3, they ended up doing something very unexpected. Shadow dropping a game in 2019 with zero marketing, zero announcement, just saying, hey, it's out, called Apex Legends, a battle royale game that garnered a lot of success.
Okay,
the late co-founder of Respawn Entertainment would tweet out, I'm so overwhelmed right now. Play Apex broke 1 million unique players in under 8 hours. And after the first day that passed by, it would have reached 2.5 million players. This is a game that had zero marketing. To many, this is how a game should launch from now on. All games should launch like this. Like, yo, we just dropped this game, play it. No announcements months prior or years prior. This was genius.
Wow, I didn't know it was how much of a success like that happened.
In just a few years, by 2024, this game would have made over $3.4 billion. And again, I really have to emphasize this. This game had no marketing. Grand Theft Auto 5 had spent $100 million.
I mean, it was attached to well-known studios, though. Like, it was attached to the Titanfall guys. So, it had that going for it. Versus Highguard, which technically was attached to them by proxy. But 3 years after the official debut of the studio, suddenly dropping a game. Yeah, you can kind of see why it didn't exactly work out for them.
On marketing alone. So of course, everyone in the gaming industry wanted to know, how did you guys do this? How did this surprise launch even come to be? When did you even start working on this game? And this is what one of the developers would say. The way we work is by finding the fun. We don't have a game director who sits down and writes up a 500-page Bible. We're like a really poorly trained dog on a walk. We just kind of sniff around, let's follow our nose wherever we go, whatever's fun, we'll go a bit deeper, rub our nose in it, roll around in that a little bit. So this had happened in mid-2017 after the post-launch support for Titanfall 2 would end. They didn't really know what to do, and they just started messing with prototypes. Some of the developers at the time were interested in making a Battle Royale game.
That is a way, a good way to make a game. Let's kind of mess around and see what's fun.
History. And so by the time Apex Legends had made billions of dollars, some people at Respawn felt, you know what? We could do this again, but this time on our own terms, and would leave to create Wildlight Entertainment. In fact, here was their exact reasoning from a Bloomberg article. Back in January 2026, Dusty Welch, the co-founder and CEO of Wildlight Entertainment, would tell Bloomberg, yeah, we left Respawn because things were getting a bit too locked up. There was no more freedom. Yeah. We couldn't just do whatever we wanted like we used to.
Well, I mean, you worked for EA, and considering this point in time, I'm sure the idea of EA selling and just trying to accumulate value for a sale price wasn't exactly outside of the realm of possibility.
However, in this article from the end of February 2026, we'd see another reason. One could say the main reason. It would say, in 2019, they had released Apex Legends, a battle royale shooter in which dozens of players fight across a giant map. The game proved to be a massive success, generating more than $3 billion in revenue.
Yeah.
Yet, as sales piled up, some of the creatives who'd worked on it felt unhappy that they weren't benefiting enough from the resulting windfall. According to people familiar with what happened, who asked not to be identified discussing non-public information, the Wildlight founders decided to do things differently. One of their plans was to set up a profit-sharing program so that if the studio did deliver another big success, everyone would benefit. An enticing setup that ultimately helped Welch and his co-founders attract many of their former Respawn colleagues to the new company.
So the idea was like a one-for-all kind of scenario, where instead of, EA taking the glut of the profits from Apex Legends, it's, like spread around the whole company. Okay.
Armed with a significant amount of funding from Tencent Holdings Ltd, Wildlight began hiring employees and making plans for its first game. The founders knew they wanted to make another multiplayer shooter, but they hoped to avoid the crowded battle royale market. So instead, they looked to Rust, a survival game in which players can raid enemy bases and build their own. They began constructing levels and designing mechanics for what was envisioned as a survival-focused shooter.
So how did they pivot into a 3v3 hero shooter?
Realized that the design wasn't working, in part because the amount of freedom conflicted with their goals for highly competitive play, according to people familiar with the events. Also, the scope was too big. Still, some parts were salvageable. The base raiding aspect of the survival game in particular seemed worth keeping. In January 2024, the team pivoted to what would become Highguard, a raid shooter that streamlined many of the survival aspects into a faster, more competitive game. So this is kind of starting to make more sense, right? The idea of why the game felt like you were playing this Frankenstein creation of multiple aspects mashed up together. Look,
just banging this out, and then we're going to jump onto the case files.
The dog sniffing phase that Respawn Entertainment used is very important. Let's not forget that Call of Duty Zombies was made by just a few people messing around in the office. But you also need a proper scope. You can't just do whatever you want.
I didn't know that about Call of Duty Zombies.
It also failed to understand what made Rust special. base rating was intense because of what was at stake. You couldn't rush it down to under an hour. The same feelings wouldn't be there. It would just be tedious.
Yeah, very true.
No demographic. If you wanted base building, you'd play Rust. If you wanted Battle Royale, you'd play Apex Legends. One really interesting thing the Bloomberg article would also mention was when asked what they thought went wrong, several former Wildlight developers used the word hubris, a belief by the company's leadership that they could emulate what had worked in the past with Apex Legends.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes a lot of sense, actually.
They'd made one of the last decade's biggest hits.
Yeah, that honestly makes a lot of sense. Yeah, it was like they thought that just because, oh, we're the Apex Legends guys, clearly we can do no wrong. Clearly, that must have put some kind of thought in their head that makes them think that they're infallible, when clearly they are very fallible.
This hubris stemmed from the fact that they were so confident this game was good, they were going to shadow drop it again, just like Apex Legends.
Oh, that would have been bad.
Hold up for itself.
That would have been
However,
bad.
After Jeff Keighley had played during their playtest, he approached the development team. He approached the co-founder, who was his friend, and told them, hey, I love the game. I want to highlight it during the Game Awards, since you guys are an independent studio.
So
the co-founder
he
would say
actually highlighted
it
it then.
Twice, and he said, guys, can I propose to you? I want to do something that's unique. I want to put it in this spot and kind of do something different and bring this to the world. Welch would say, and that wasn't our plan, but like, are we going to turn down the exposure? Who would turn that down? And then you'd have Chad Grenier chime in too, the ex-creative director of Apex Legends and the head of the studio of Wildlight, saying, so we rushed a trailer together. I wish the reception had been better, but in hindsight, we made a trailer to entertain really quickly and didn't show the gameplay loop and was different and unique.
Yeah, see, there's your problem right there. You didn't show your gameplay loop, so people don't actually know what they're looking at. And like people usually like to know what kind of game they're looking at before they play the game, even if it's a free-to-play game. So it's like, you should have probably focused on the gameplay loop instead of big, flashy boom boom and characters.
We would then take the exact same approach as Apex Legends. No real marketing until release, and then a massive social media campaign with influencers, streamers, content creators, you name it. Problem is, though, during the silence and during the time in which people were calling this game CONCORD 2.0, the morale of the team was hit pretty badly.
I can imagine.
They were watching people.
I can really imagine that.
They worked on for 3 years. Barely a month after the game had come out, the layoffs would begin. It would be held online on a Zoom call since the studio worked remotely, and they'd pretty much announce, yeah, the funding was entirely pulled from the studio. The 100-person team had over 80% of it laid off that same day. By the time Eurogamer's
Tencent
report
just
on February 27th,
pulling
2026 would
support.
Come out, there were less than 20
They saw the writing
people
on the
still
wall.
working at the studio, doing their best to release updates before the eventual shutdown on March 12th. On March 3rd, Highguard would announce to the world that it was shutting down on March 12th, and shortly after that, you would start seeing way more posts posted on LinkedIn from previous workers at Wildlight talking about the fact that this game was shutting down and how, well, they were looking for a job, saying things like,
yeah, that sucks. That just really sucks, honestly.
That we loved to
play.
It
sucks for them. It really does.
Would make a post starting it off with,
it really does suck for them.
To become the next Apex-sized hit to succeed. We weren't chasing that scale.
Yes, you were. Yes, you were. You were trying to emulate Apex's success by doing the exact same thing to launch Apex for this.
What we needed was a smaller but stable and sustainable player base, and ultimately we weren't able to find it. That's interesting because I would argue a smaller but stable and sustainable player base would be around maybe 2,000 players, a few thousands, let's say. But let's remember that by the time they had reached 2,000 or so players on Steam, they conducted the mass layoffs. That's without counting the players on consoles. So this really begs the question, what was the studio even hoping to achieve? Did they really think they'd have over 10,000 players within a week if it wasn't for the Game Awards? This whole thing reeks of
it was never going to happen. That was never going to happen.
He then go on to say how proud he is of the journey of his team and that he had learned a lot throughout all of it. At the same time, though, you'd also find him on Twitter saying something that was very interesting. You see, someone would quote tweet the closure announcement of Highguard, saying, people don't praise failure, but it's the foundation of every success, nothing but love for Wildlight. To which someone would reply with, it's just baffling to me they released the game in such a skeleton state and decided now's the time to add account levels and introduce some sort of skill tree system. It's crazy to see the parallels between this game failing and seeing merit.
So they launched the game and they didn't even have account levels. They didn't have skill tree systems. Oh, Jesus Christ.
Marathon come back after so many tests. This is when the studio head, Chad Grenier, would say, when you're out of time and money, you have to release a game with the runway you have available and hope players will stick with you post.
Hey there, Basha Yamada.
Now that definitely didn't give off the same tone that his LinkedIn post did. Hell, I'm even baffled why you would want to even admit this, you know? You had close to 4 years of development, and this was the best you could do?
Okay, like, seriously, you had 4 years of development, and you had 10-cent money, and this is all you could do. I'm curious now about how much money got sunk into this.
The more we learn about this game, the more we understand this was mismanagement. They were fully funded and got way too confident about that. But development and management issues aside, some people would spark up discussions about the art direction of this game and the missed potential. Many of the employees who worked on this game artistically would start posting much of the work on websites like ArtStation, showcasing it in their portfolio. One thing that people would find is this very interesting character concept. Being absolutely baffled as to why this wasn't included in the game's release.
I very much like the design.
Some way more boring designs. At the same time, the artist Kasaragul would make a very interesting long post about the art direction of this game and why it was baffling, how none of it really made sense. It didn't mesh well together.
Yeah, just looking at it.
Because much of the game's art was outsourced to different studios and people outside of the studio itself, the outsourcing team as well as the art director failed to keep cohesion, which resulted in not just the gameplay itself,
that'll do
like
it.
Some sort of Frankenstein creation,
that'll definitely
but also
do
its
it.
entire art direction. The entire thing was mismanaged to hell from day one. It was a tragedy.
Oh.
And with that, I actually want to
tragedy, more like a train wreck, honestly.
This is drawn from the article by Jeff Keighley detailing the development of Half-Life 2. The team at Valve wanted Gabe Newell to greenlight Half-Life 2's development. It was actually very hard to do that because their proof of concept just wasn't good enough for him for a while. Of course, there was the argument, well, why can't Gabe just finance it? I mean, come on, you know, like what's stopping him? He has the money for it. And this is when this paragraph comes along saying, true, but most game developers also aren't in Valve's position, where Newell has enough money to fund a game's development out of his pocket if he so pleases. So is it really fair to hold other developers
Hey there, Hollow Weasel. I'm doing good.
Ask Newell this question and he grows agitated. Any developer who bitches about, oh, our publisher cut off our money, or the publisher made us ship the game early, doesn't get it, he says.
Oh,
That's the interesting problem you have to solve as a developer. If you don't, well, you'll be perpetually screwed.
Wow.
How do you solve the problem? Newell cites
generational quote here,
where a young college kid in Vancouver made a Half-Life add-on as a prime example. You bootstrap, Newell suggests. The Counter-Strike guys didn't have some sugar daddy show up and drop a huge wad of cash in their lap. You have to be creative.
This is why we love Gabe Newell in this house.
This was said back in 2002. And today in 2026, it could not ring more true.
Absolutely.
CONCORD had a sugar daddy. Their name was Sony. $400 million. Look where that got them. The game sucked. Period. You want funding? How about you make a game first? A proof of concept that's actually fun. When it comes to the world leaderboard of any percent speedruns of shutting down after release, Highguard now sits at 4th place behind the Culling 2, Concord, and Crucible at 45 days. The Twitter account Poorly Aged Things would quote tweet Jeff Keighley's
I'm
GIF
sorry,
saying,
Jeff.
I'll be accepting your apologies, saying, I'm sorry, Jeff. To which Jeff would reply with a shocked image of that same grandpa in the GIF. I mean, in the movie itself, he would say this, and then he would be proven wrong. So it was very ironic. At least he was playing into the joke. But some people would be very weird about this and would photograph Jeff on Rodeo Drive in Los Angeles and say that this was him a day after Highguard announced the studio shutting down. I don't know why you gotta take a picture of him IRL for this, but what do I expect from people at this point? Some would even argue that Jeff actually needs to take a level of accountability for the game shutting down. But personally, I think if you have common sense, you'd understand that he actually did them a huge favor here.
Yeah, like he gave them way more publicity.
The game would have definitely launched
probably
like
more than they deserved, honestly.
100,000 on PC. Additionally, 2 million people tried it, and the majority didn't leave because the internet made them. Okay, Paul Tassi makes a great point here. Marketing can only get you to try a game. It can't get you to stay on the game if it's not fun. And
plus, it was a free game. So even if people just didn't have that incentive to stay. I'm not saying they should have charged for this underbaked mess. But like you can see why so many people played the game but thought, nah, not for me. Because the game was free. And if a game is free, then you don't have that integrated incentive structure that is buying the game built in to make you to make you feel like you have to stick around and just like tough it out.
And Highguard simply was not fun. It was weird. And at this point, it
Yeah.
seems like every year we're seeing yet another disaster story that is similar to Concord, a game that no one asked for, that had a big budget, that had very talented people working on it, and somehow, some way, it was worked on for years without anyone thinking, wait a second, are we really about to do this?
Like Sega took a giant L financially by shutting down the live service they were working on, but at least they had the common sense to just kill it now instead of losing even more money in the long run to try to just run it and see what happens. Like, honestly.
I don't know, man. All I know is that the gaming industry is in a very rough spot right now. It's almost impossible to find a job. AI isn't even to blame for this. Executives have no idea what players actually want, and if they do, they're always late on it. And
Oh, yeah. Executives have no idea what they're talking about.
They have no incentive to actually learn from their mistakes. If you want to make games, make them. But make something that people want to actually play. And don't ask for sugar daddy money. Make a playable game first, then pitch it, and then get your funding. Otherwise, you'll end up like Concord, like Highguard, and God knows whatever else is going to release soon that will face the same fate. Thank you so much for watching this video until the very end.
Ooh, that was a good one.
Enjoyed it. I love you so much.
That was a good one.
I missed you. Make sure to check out my
Platonically, he says.
Exclusive content of me with videos, both short and long, yapping. And I'll see you in the next video, whenever that is. Hopefully soon. Take care and mwah.
Mwah. And that was the tumultuous story of Highguard. Needless to say, it was a train wreck. It was all over the place, and a story of hubris, ego, and really just not knowing how to read the trends of the market and how to really pay attention to the game industry. Like, it definitely reeked of developers coasting, like not like all of like the lower level devs, like the big guys at the top being like, oh, we made Apex, so naturally we can do no wrong, and like that kind of like feeling you get from them. It was a mess, absolute total mess, and I once again feel vindicated in my statement that nobody plays Highguard. Now they don't because the game is shut down. Oh, let me know what you think about Highguard down in the comments below. What's your opinions on it? Do you like it? Did you play it? Let me know. I want to hear about it. And of course, don't forget to hit like on the video, subscribe to the channel, and ding that bell so you know when I upload, and it helps me out in the algorithm. And as always, I will see you next time at the HQ. Bye-bye.